Presentation of Dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family's legacy of building the great state of Idaho.
Coming up, Idahoans overwhelmingly elected a Republican president and lawmakers, but rejected 3 laws supported by GOP leaders. Why might that have happened, and what might the election results mean for future public policy in the state? Our post-election analysis starts in just a moment on Dialogue. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome to Dialogue. I'm Marcia Franklin. On Election Day, slightly more than half the nation's voters approved a second term for President Obama. Democrats won 2 more seats in the U.S. Senate and regained control of 7 state houses they lost in 2010. The scene was much different in Idaho, where voters overwhelmingly chose Mitt Romney for president, re-elected 2 Republicans for Congress, and voted in a legislature that looks the same as before, with the GOP controlling more than 80% of the seats. The exception, all 3 education propositions on the ballot supported by Republican leaders failed, and Democrats were able to gain back a few seats in Ada County. Here to parse the results are 3 election watchers, our own Greg Hahn of Idaho Reports, Betsy Russell of the Spokesman Review, and Professor Gary Moncrief of Boise State University. Welcome to all of you. Well, let's first take a look at the top of the ticket. Not too many surprises. We cannot call Idaho a swing state or a battleground state, but still interesting to take a look at. First, the presidential results. Nationally, of course, Barack Obama won 50% to Mitt Romney's 48%, the popular vote. In Idaho, the presidential race looked very different. Mitt Romney pulled 65% of the vote, with Barack Obama 33% of the vote. Mitt Romney got about 3 percentage points more than John McCain.
Republican candidates have been pulling in the 60% since 2000 in Idaho. I've got, Bush in 2067. He actually got 69% in 04. You go back to the 90s, it drops down a little bit. But, it's been since 1964 since the Democrats won the state. So I don't think anybody was too shocked.
I was actually surprised that Romney didn't have even a higher total.
too.
I thought he might be upwards of 70%.
Mm-hmm. And Obama was down by about 3 percentage points from 4 years ago. Taking a look at, U.S. Representative Idaho's District 1, Raul Labrador easily won this race with 63% of the vote to Jimmy Ferris's 31%. Quite a looser race, if you want more separation than between Labrador and Minnick. 51 to 44%, and of course between Minnick and Sally, where Minnick won. I don't think there was any question here. You cover the North Idaho that
Sure.
Raul Labrador was going to win.
Yeah, Jimmy Ferris was a brand new candidate, never run before, really struggled with fundraising and with getting his message out in this very large district, and he got 31%, which is pretty respectable based on how he was doing in the campaign. I think it was never in doubt, really, that Labrador was going to win a second term.
And that translates to just under 100,000 votes for Jimmy Ferris in that district. U.S. Representative Idaho's District 2, again, Mike Simpson, the favorite, 65% of the vote. He did poll 71% in 2008, so a little bit less. Nicole Lefebvre polling in 35%, the Democrat. She tried to put a good face on this today with a blog entry that she sent out saying that she pulled in about 25,000 more voters than last time.
Yeah, and they worked really hard. I know she worked really hard. She had had some capital from working at the State House, from being in the legislature for 8 years, and sort of made this kind of a sacrifice from the start, knowing that was going to be an uphill run. But I think certainly folks in the party appreciated that she was keeping the dialogue going.
Can a Democrat win? I mean, there has been a Democrat elected from this district in the past. Can a Democrat
Certainly.
win again?
Well, Mike Simpson is a very, very popular incumbent who's in a key position in his committees and so forth. I think this was actually at 35% a pretty good showing for Lefebvre.
And Gary could probably talk about the redistricting aspects. When you move the line over, adding more of the Boise area into District 2, away from the one district that has been more recently competitive, you say with Minnick and Sally, it does make it harder for Democrats to show, I think, in either one.
Yeah, but I mean, the bottom line is it's a very Republican state, and with only 2 congressional districts, pretty much any way you cut those lines, they're going to both be Republican districts.
Yeah. What do you think Nicole Lefebvre's future might be? You have any sense of what she might do next? I've heard people say, oh, she should run for superintendent of public instruction, or Do you have a sense of?
She said before the election that if she got 40%, she'd consider running again in 2 years. She didn't get 40%, so I don't know where that leaves her.
Yeah,
Interesting.
I think she'll stay involved in politics for sure. Whether behind the scenes or.
Well, going on to one of the ballot initiatives, the Right to Hunt, HJR 2 as amended. Again, this passed easily. This puts into the Constitution the right to hunt, fish, and trap, 73% to 27%.
And although there was controversy about the wording in this, these things just almost never fail, especially not in a state like Idaho where there's such an outdoorsy tradition.
And they've been passing in a number of states as well.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. So is it one of these movements across the country, anti?
Particularly in the West, but I think it's happened in the South and in Nebraska and
worried
elsewhere
about
as well.
like animal rights groups?
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, those were the not too many surprises there, but that leads us into the education propositions. Total reversal here. All of these education propositions, all supported by Republican leaders, failed. And let's take a listen to Governor Otter, who held a press conference. Well, actually, he had a signing, and he allowed reporters to ask him questions about this. He put his best face on this by saying, "I celebrate the independence of the Idaho voter." Let's listen.
The Idaho voter isn't going to be led any place without some rational thought on their own, without some investigation on their own. I have been the benefactor of that, and in some cases, I haven't benefited so much from it. But I still love the independents, and I celebrate their independence today. But I'm not going to spend any energy or any time saying, what if we'd have done this and what if we'd have done that? What I'm going to say is, what is the path forward to the leadership? Who are the stakeholders that we need to get into the room? And what are the things, where do we start working on where we can agree? And if there's some disagreements that we still have, then we set those aside until we can find the areas where we have agreement.
Well, this wasn't, I'll just jump in. This was not a vote that Boise and Pocatello and some of the more left-leaning cities kind of came in with huge turnouts and manhandled the rural parts of the state. These things were defeated uniformly all over the state. Small towns, bigger cities, rural agricultural areas, timber areas. I mean, it was very much, and I think you hear that in what he's saying. These were their people. These are the folks who then went ahead and passed the hunting thing by 73%, voted in Romney by a lot. These were Republican voters that rejected it.
Everything we need to know about this, you can find out from looking at Madison County. In Madison County, Romney got 93% of the vote. 93% of the vote. And then Madison County voters voted 51% for Prop 1, 47% for Prop 2, and 35% for Prop 3. When you get that kind of that kind of roll off, that kind of undervote, something's happening.
Prop 3 was particularly unpopular with the electorate across the state. 2/3 of voters rejected it.
Let's put those numbers up. Okay. Proposition 3, that's the technology one.
The technology one that includes the laptops, and the state had just unveiled this very high-profile $180 million contract to purchase laptops for every Idaho high school student, and it was an attractive-sounding deal, neat machines, but people did not get excited. They said absolutely this was not something they wanted to do. 2/3 again.
Was that a misstep to hold that press conference and unveil that $180 million contract so close to the vote? I mean, to put right in the voters' faces how much this is going to cost.
That's true. At the time, I thought that it was a bid to get more support for the proposition because of the idea that Hewlett-Packard, which has a large presence in Boise, although it does not manufacture laptops in Boise, it makes printers, but it's a company that's had some challenges, and it could really benefit from this, and that could help people who work there and who live in Idaho if their company was doing better. So I thought it was a bid to also generate some excitement about perhaps the machines themselves. And I think it did that for some. But what we found out was that the vast majority of people did not buy into the whole proposition, did not want to go that route.
And it created, I think, some strange bedfellows. I mean, the teachers were very much against it. And the teacher-parent coalitions that sort of drove the no vote. But then you also have this large group of folks in Idaho who don't want to spend money. They don't want to spend state dollars, whether it's in schools or in any other agency. And that big number, you could tell there was a large group of people who were perfectly willing to vote for the other side on the other two ballots, but they were not going to spend that kind of money.
And the online requirement, I think, bothered some people as well. That is the fact that you had to have X number of credits online in order to graduate from high school, I think which is part of the Prop 3 component, I think really bothered a lot.
Except we don't really know if that's going to be repealed or not, since the State Board of Education, we were talking about this the other day on Idaho Reports, granted, these laws told the State Board of Education to go ahead and set that requirement. The State Board went ahead and did set the requirement. Now they would have to act proactively right of their own volition as a separate entity to repeal those two required classes.
And real briefly, with the contract, does Idaho lose any money by having to bail out of this now?
No. The way the contract was set up, they did ask the bidders to identify any early termination costs that would come if the voters rejected this proposition, and HP in their bid said 0. We're not going to do anything till the day after the election. If the voters turn this down, the state will not have to pay us anything.
Let's go through the other parts of this. The Proposition 1 had to do with collective bargaining. Again, restrictions on collective bargaining. Folks rejected that. And the National Conference of State Legislatures, the analysts there, really honed in on this nationally, actually, as an example of unions winning. And the proponents said, if you vote this down, it's a vote for big unions. Is that your analysis of what happened? Is that this is about union support, or is it about teacher support?
Well, it's about, in my mind, the vote in Idaho was about two things. One is teacher support, and the other one is the process. I think a lot of people actually like some of the things that are in these propositions, but they were really offended by the way this was presented basically to the public through the legislature and through Tom Luna as a fait accompli. And I think people were really bothered by that if there had been a dialogue beforehand, if some of this had been discussed in greater detail and some collaboration had occurred, I think some of this stuff might have passed. I mean, Prop 1, the first proposition did not fail by that much, actually.
Well, you got 57% no. I think about the spectacle that we saw when these laws were passed in the legislature in 2011, and I have never seen anything like that in my years of covering the legislature. We saw huge hearings, massive turnout, all kinds of people coming in to have their say, almost all against these laws, and they pass anyway. It kind of, I think, left some people with the impression that the legislature was ignoring the public. And that's exactly what a referendum process is. It's the public stepping up and saying, no, we don't want you to pass that. And that's what they've done. They've repealed it.
Right. And indeed, this year, when we look at across the country, there were more referenda on the ballot than since the 1920s or something. 12 referendum. Referendum. And sometimes that happens, I guess, when you have a political power concentrated in both a governorship and in the
if you look at the states where this happened, it was basically all states in which that's the case, in which you had unified government. But 3 of those were in Idaho, obviously all connected to this thing, and 3 of them were in one other state. I think it was Maryland. And so, the numbers are a little high this year, but beyond that, there were 12 of them, and 6 of them failed. And of those 6 that failed, that is rejected what the legislature did, 5 of them had to do with the education issue.
Do you think that any lawmakers paid in any way for their support of these laws? I mean, the voters overturned them, but then in turn, did lawmakers who supported them lose at the election? If
anyone did, it was Senator Mitch Toryansky from Boise, Republican who lost to the same candidate who he beat 2 years ago. But that was not the only issue that played in that race. There was also the ultrasound abortion bill. There were a variety of issues. There were quite a number of legislators who were targeted over these bills and were reelected anyway by the very same voters who rejected these bills, and that includes Senator John Getty from Coeur d'Alene, the chairman of the Senate Education Committee and the lead sponsor of these bills. He was reelected.
Proposition 2 was about merit pay. This one failed as well. The teachers say they still want their merit pay that's owed to them this year.
Well, and the point that a lot of teachers have made, and certainly made on our Idaho Reports election special, was because those they were taking money out of the other teacher salaries and putting into these bonuses. They're still trying to catch up with where they were before. The teachers, you go several years or a couple years before this happened. That was a lot of those the issue, or a lot of the stuff in that merit pay discussion was hammered out with teachers at the table for an earlier grant application. So I'd be surprised if that didn't come back again, because...
Well, and that's what I wanted to ask you real briefly. The governor says he wants to sit down. The other side says it wants to sit down. He says they want to cherry pick the things they all agree on. What do you think?
There are
some things will stay?
There are a few things that probably everyone agrees on. For example, in Proposition 3, it required the state to pay for up to a full year of college credit, concurrent credit, for high school seniors who finish their graduation requirements early and then take college classes while they're still in high school. Nobody said that that's a bad idea. On the merit pay, though, even though that was the one that was negotiated somewhat with the teachers in advance, there were some problems that came up right before the election when they announced which schools teachers would get the bonuses and which would not. In a number of parts of the state, there were noted schools that have been seen as successes that have a lot of poor and disadvantaged students, and those schools, their teachers got nothing, whereas other schools in the districts, their teachers did get them. And both in Boise and in Coeur d'Alene, we heard about teachers talking about pooling their bonus money to try to give some to those other teachers who didn't get it.
So do you think they can all sit down and play nicely, or some bills going to be pushed through again?
Well, one of the problems that's going to come up this year is the personnel changes that have occurred in the legislature, particularly in the House. In the House, you have 44% of the people that are going to be in the House this year are freshmen. That's extraordinary. 31 new freshmen. And in the Republican caucus, it's a 44% as well. So there's a lot of new faces there. And one of the things that means is there's going to be a lot of turnover on the committees. And if you look at the House Education Committee, the four most ranking members of that committee won't be there this year. They're all gone. A couple of them went to the Senate, a couple of them retired. And so there's going to be, somebody's going to have to step up on leadership on the House side in particular, I think, on this.
Well, and there's a good component to that, I think, is that 44% of the people in the Idaho House won't have their hackles up because they passed something that everybody rejected. Right. And they're like, well, we were in favor of this, you just didn't listen to us enough. These guys can come in totally fresh, talking to both sides, though. Yeah. And I will think, you need to sort of, what do they say, talk softly and carry a big stick. This shows that the teachers still have a pretty big stick. And that was a big question a couple years ago when they went after Luna's re-election. They went after Luna's first election. It was really looking like, and you could tell that from the way these laws were written, that the teachers union didn't have the pull that it once did. This kind of indicates that maybe they are still a big-time statewide player, and that's something that folks need to pay attention to when they're writing laws.
Everyone knows a teacher probably, or
well,
has a teacher
you had
in their
actually
family.
brought that up. That's exactly right.
When I talk to people, they said, well, I'm going to vote for Romney, but my daughter is a teacher, and she's told me don't vote for these things.
Yeah, I think Luna and Otter both actually thought there's a difference between what they kept calling the union thugs who are, out there paying for these ads and everybody's teacher. And their hope in that was that when you went to talk to your teacher, because everyone who has a kid, everyone who has a relative as a teacher was going to ask that teacher, what should I do? And, they were sort of banking on the fact that the teachers were sort of moving away from the union, or at least the union's ideals. And that may or may not be the case. The teachers just certainly didn't like these bills.
I want to get to a couple of legislative races, but real briefly, do you think that this rejection of these laws was also a referendum on Superintendent Luna and his efficacy?
I think it was very much a referendum on Superintendent Luna. And I thought it was interesting that the day after the election, we were hearing calls from both sides, from Governor Otter and from the opponents of these laws, for collaboration, for starting fresh, for coming up with a new way to approach education reform in Idaho. We did not hear that from Superintendent Luna. He put out a statement in which he basically listed everything he had in those laws and said they're critical and we got to have them. He has shown, as yet, no inclination to go a different route, and it's going to be very difficult for him. I think he's seriously damaged by this.
You could never collect on this, but I'd bet if Luna had been on the ballot, he'd have won. I mean, there wasn't a statewide Republican who came close to
well, it'll be interesting to see who challenges him in the future. Some people have talked about Brian Cronin doing that. Real briefly, let's look at some of the races in North Idaho. No super surprises way up north. District 2, Vito Barbieri, despite comments he made that offended some people, won handily over the Democrat. In position B, we have a Republican, Ed Morse, winning over Dan English. Now, as we move further down, though, the races got a little bit tighter in North Idaho, North Central Idaho, and Moscow, District 5 Senate race. Dan Schmidt, Democrat, pulled it out just slightly over his Republican opponent. What do you attribute that to, Betsy?
Well, there were mixed results in north central Idaho, and I think that Dan Schmidt was expected to win re-election. He's a Democratic senator,
close.
and he did, but it was quite close. And then there was another race that was very much up in the air in that district, and it was a House race for an open seat between a moderate Republican, Cynthia Gideon.
We have this up as well. Cynthia Gideon, tight.
Right, and Democrat Paulette Jordan. I think Jordan was expected to win that, but she did not. Gideon won.
Is it unusual to see Republicans winning around the University of Idaho?
That was Tom
Moscow?
Trail's old seat.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
so it had been held by a really
Moderate Republican.
not even a moderate Republican. He's beyond a moderate.
It's a new district, and it's Latah and Benewah counties. And so it was a little bit of a wild card because Latah is the majority of the population there. Latah has tended to elect either Democrats or moderate Republicans, like Tom Trail.
Gary Schroeder, who used to have Schmidt's seat.
But Benewah County has been much more conservative, although it also has some Democratic tradition. I thought it was interesting that in the other House race in that district, Shirley Ringo won re-election over the hand-picked successor of Representative Dick Harwood, and that's perhaps the most liberal member of the legislature, defeating the...
So it was all over the map
Yes.
kind of here. A tie race, a win for Democrats, and a win
takes
for
a little
Republicans.
time after redistricting to
Exactly. I
settle
mean,
down.
when you've got redistricting and what you're doing is you're moving around precincts, obviously, and some are more Republican and some are more conservative. What normally happens after redistricting is you get a lot more competitive races than you had the previous couple of years. That didn't happen in Idaho. There were only 16 races out of 105 that were within 10 percentage points of one another. So, we're talking about a very small percentage of really competitive races in Idaho.
Well, let's talk about one of those, Senator from District 6. Again, the Republican won 55% to 45% over John Bradbury. It was a heated race.
And Bradbury's fairly well known from his runs for the Supreme Court.
And Johnson, he hadn't even been elected. He was a recent appointee.
But
and
he had won a competitive primary.
He did win the primary. That's true. I thought, this was one of those races that could go either way, and we saw the Republicans invest heavily in Johnson's campaign and really outspent Bradbury, and he was successful.
In District 15, here's one where the Democrats poured a lot of money in the race between Fred Martin and Betty Richardson.
More money than ever before, I think, is what
think
was
that
Did
was
not
shaping
work
out
for
to
the
be.
Democrats. Yeah. Any guess why?
It's a
Republican.
still a
Less
Republican
voicey.
district, but here's what I think could happen there. It depends on what these new Republicans in that district are like, because John Andreessen, you go back, Hod Pomeroy. I mean, the people from this district, Max Black, have always been pretty moderate. So I think the district could react to folks if they end up not kind of being from that wing of the party.
It's the
Now,
only Republican district in the city of Boise.
Yeah.
All the other ones went completely Democratic.
Well, and let's take a look at that. District 18, two highly contested races. Brandon Durst and Mitch Troyansky, who you mentioned before, Betsy, the Democrats took the seat back. It had been narrowly lost. And again, in District 18, Janie Ward Engelking beating Julie Ellsworth. Again, a flip-flop.
Mm-hmm.
But although the Democrats took these seats back, it was evened out by Republicans who took a couple seats.
Exactly.
From
Wendy
Democrats.
Jaquit's former seat narrowly went to a Republican.
And that's District 26, House Rep Position A. Wendy Jaquit, former leader of the Democrats. Steve Miller, a Republican, took her seat.
That's a really interesting district to watch in the future because we don't have a really good metric on that one yet. You had, in the Senate, you had Michelle Stennett running, but she was unopposed.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And Donna Pence won that seat in the House seat, but she didn't win by as much as I think one might have expected her to win
At
by.
one point during the evening, she was actually trailing.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then you had the Republican win the other one. That's a district to remember that was changed considerably in the redistricting process.
Although the boundaries, I talked to Ms. Jaquit today, the boundaries themselves stayed the same, the numbering didn't. So she was saying that
they lost some of the Democratic precincts.
Her thought was that so many people turned out to vote for Romney in the southern part of that district, not Blaine County.
Okay,
Yeah,
right.
that's always
that
been. Yeah,
tipped it.
Blaine is
Right,
the voting
right,
majority,
exactly.
but then
And then
Gooding
you got
County,
Lincoln
some of
and
these
Gooding.
Lincoln rural
Right.
areas, but the Democrats there. I mean, it used to be a split district. When I
Right.
started, there were two Democrats and one Republican, and the three really worked together. When I worked in Twin Falls, I would follow them, and they were a team. And it kind of went all Democrat after that. But I think Wendy Jigwood had some big coattails that weren't there this time.
And District 29, we don't want to miss Eastern Idaho, Pocatello, all the positions went to Democrats. It's interesting here, this race, there was an independent polling 13%.
Idaho State University professor.
Yeah.
We don't, I mean, that one, you know, you don't know always who's voting for the independent, if it's Republican-leaning folks or Democrat-leaning folks.
But it went Democratic, which traditionally Pocatello has been. And I know you're interested in a race in Caldwell as well, District 10, as we start to wrap up here.
Yeah, I'll just say quickly, I've mapped out sort of where I'm always looking ahead a couple of years. The Democrats, Larry Grant, the chair of the Democratic Party, he says any race within 10% is something to aim at. And as Professor Moncrief pointed out, there aren't that many. But there are a couple that they could get easily. District 5, that one we were talking about up in Latah County, the one in outside of Blaine County, I think are probably the two low-hanging fruit. The couple other we just mentioned, 6 up in Lewiston and 15 here in Boise might be a little bit more aspirational. 10 is sort of the holy grail for the Democrats. They've always wanted to sort of, Caldwell seems like it's ripe for, and it's a self-contained district. It doesn't go out. There's a big Hispanic population. But they're just not making any headway at all. A couple good candidates. I saw leaf skiving ads all day long on Election Day, and I think Jasper Licalzi is the one who jokes that Saddam Hussein could run as a Republican in Canyon County and win. So it's remains to be seen.
I don't know about that, but well, we have about a minute and a half left as we look at this legislature. Do you think that it's one that will be any different from years past? Do you see any?
I think one of the things that's really going to be interesting about this legislature is the difference in experience between the Senate and the House. Because the House has all these new freshmen coming in. The Senate has a lot of people who will be new senators, but most of them came over from the House, and there's a couple of other people who won this time who had been out for a while and are coming back. I think there's only 2 people in the Senate this time who are truly freshmen, who have never served before. That's extraordinary. It's that you have that much experience in the Senate side and so little in the House side. That doesn't happen in Idaho very often.
Go ahead.
Well, I think that the results of this election have completely changed the agenda for this year's legislative session. They are going to be dealing with Obamacare. They are going to be dealing with what replaces school reform. Everything has changed.
They changed it to last year's agenda.
And leadership battle, we have about 30 seconds left. You see any leadership battles there?
Apparently, Speaker Denny is campaigning against the challenge from Scott Bedke.
Yeah, there were some, if you walked around the Republican headquarters on election night, you could see some pointed conversations going on there. So that
with 31 freshmen, that's a big pool of people to pick up.
I'll say this quickly. Everybody shows up thinking they're conservative. They realize they're either more so or less so than the rest of the body, and so you don't really know where those folks are going to come down until they start having to make some decisions.
Perfect segue to tell people to watch Idaho Reports.
That's right, starting January 4th, or an hour long all through the session, and all the way through June this year, so kind of excited about that.
We are too. It'll be great to see you. Folks, you've been listening to our election recap on Dialogue. Greg Hahn from Idaho Reports, Betsy Russell from the Spokesman Review, and Dr. Gary Moncrief from Boise State University. Thanks so much to all of you.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for tuning in.
Presentation of Dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family's legacy of building the great state of Idaho. Check out our website, become a friend on Facebook, or follow us on Twitter.